Support for WMFE comes from JustCallMo.com and attorney Mo DeWitt, proud presenter of WMFE's Engage program. Mo DeWitt is committed to offering legal guidance in personal injury cases, such as car accidents and slip and falls. Offices in Orlando. More at JustCallMo.com. Welcome to Engage, leading conversations that matter. Engage is made possible with support from inaugural sponsor JustCallMo.com and the support of listeners like you.
You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Coming up, we will meet an area man who has captured the spirit of Spanish flamenco music and brings the passionate, high-energy music and dance to Central Florida stages. First, though, today. Yesterday, Governor Ron DeSantis signed the Gabby Petito Act into law. This law will aid law enforcement in identifying cases of domestic abuse. It is named after a young woman who was murdered by her fiancé in a high-profile 2021 case. Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie were traveling the country in a van, visiting national parks. Witnesses reported several incidents involving erratic behavior on Laundrie's part. Late August 2021, Laundrie returned to his home in Northport, Florida, without Gabby. And for several weeks, he refused to say anything about her whereabouts, and he eventually disappeared from his parents' home. Petito's remains were found in a park in Wyoming. An autopsy determined the 22-year-old had been strangled. Laundrie's body was found in Sarasota County. He had died by suicide and left a message in a notebook admitting to killing Gabby. Today, we spoke with Lieutenant Paul Bloom with the Marion County Sheriff's Office about this new Gabby Petito law and how it's going to be enforced. Lieutenant Bloom started our conversation by describing how proliferate domestic abuse is in his jurisdiction.
I can tell you this, I'm glad to see the interest that our legislators are taking in this because from a law enforcement standpoint, this is what we deal with the most. We were just talking about this today with the sheriff of our top calls, our top criminal calls. We just looked at what we had ran last year. We ran over 12,000 calls. These were domestic violence. And that's a big thing. The next closest criminal call in that category was about 4,000 calls. So of all of our criminal calls, this is the top call that we respond to every single day. So anything we can do to help this and protect victims, we're here to do it.
What does this law allow you to do that you couldn't before?
Well, for us, this is going to be just I guess a deeper dive into what the victim is experiencing. So I can tell you these deputies and officers that are out there doing this day in and day out want to do the most for the victim, and this law just kind of lays some parameters there where we can check off and see where is this person at. And unfortunately, it's sad to say there are levels of domestic violence. Somebody that's in a relationship, they may find themselves in the beginning phases of it. Maybe it's verbal, a little bit of physical abuse, and these things typically just escalate. So as when we come across somebody, this may not be the first time they've been a victim. And when we come across a victim, now with new parameters, we can kind of more deeply investigate and just help determine where they're at. Because the truth is, the resources are there. For years now, we've been putting resources in place to help these victims, and it's a crime it's very tough to prevent because these type of crimes happen behind closed doors. It's not something out in public where somebody's, say, stealing from a store or committing some traffic violation. It's not something we see until after it's happened, and that's unfortunate. So for us to have all the resources in place, we want to know exactly what this victim needs, where they are in this stage, and how we can best help them.
Do you anticipate the application of this law protecting victims of domestic abuse?
Yes, I think this is ultimately nothing written on paper can replace just victim education, can replace public education, can replace the acts that law enforcement does every day to intervene in these situations and the counseling and things that are available. So, but the law helps us and helps all those that are vested in this, from domestic violence counseling to anger management counselors, all the above. All of us are vested in this. So any law that just helps us do this better, we're for that. And again, I'm just glad to see that the Florida legislator and the governor are behind this to help law enforcement help these victims.
Is it too early to talk about what kind of training your department may have to have this law in place?
So maybe a little too early to put specifics on the type training we're going to have. I know that there will be training, not just our agency, but law enforcement in general. Anytime we have new laws come out, and typically this time of year, going to the summer, we'll have some new laws that hit, and so we want to train up on those, and we always do. It's a learning curve, and it's part of being a law enforcement officer. It's a continually learning process here. So some laws go away and some laws are changed. This one will definitely be big on our list. Again, I guess the most calls we go to are domestic violence, and there's not even a close second place. So the training is going to be very key in this, and it's going to be very important for all of us as we go out and just continue to make a difference in domestic violence.
Can you help me understand what your deputies experience in those situations? What do you hear from them when they're going to these calls?
Well, from a deputy standpoint, we do hear, unfortunately, we hear a lot of frustration sometimes because we go to the same house maybe, and we're trying to get a complete story of what's happened and where this victim is at. And many times we make an arrest, and unfortunately, sometimes we'll see the same victim back with the same offender. And we understand there's a lot of dynamics, a lot of moving pieces in a relationship. And for us, we are trying to do everything we can to stop crime, to ensure that everyone can enjoy the peace that we have here and that we're offered. So I think from a law enforcement standpoint, we're seeing more and more of it, and it's not even just I would say sharing in the last 5 years, this is increased. And truly, I don't think we're alone in this here in Marion County. I think across the state, across the nation, a lot of your homicides stem from domestic violence situations. So you got to think what drives somebody to go the farthest, the most heinous crime in killing somebody. What drives them to that point? And it's typically a crime of the heart there. So if we can make early intervention, I know our deputies want to do that. We want to be there. We have domestic violence investigators. Their sole job is dealing with domestic violence and helping victims. And we have a SHIELD program here at the Marion County Sheriff's Office, basically like a ankle monitor for those that they are able to bond out of jail, these defendants and these offenders, where we track them. We have detectives that track their every move. So they're not allowed to be around the victim's work, the victim's home, and other places. So when we see that happening, we're able to intervene. It is just that important because we know what comes from violence, the domestic violence. There's a series of steps, and it just gets worse and worse. And if the victim does not see that happening, we want to help them see that happening and intervene in any way we can. When you look out there, you don't have to look far. You can find victims of domestic violence. I think every one of your listeners may have somebody they know that was at one point a victim of domestic violence. And I think it's good to talk to folks that are on the other side of it, and they had a different viewpoint from when they were in the middle of it. And sometimes it was hard to see when they're in the middle of it. It's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and they're struggling. But when you can talk to somebody that's been through that and survived it and has overcome it and has moved on and done better with their life, I think they appreciate any intervention that somebody from the outside, whether that's us at law enforcement or counselors or just a friend that comes up and say, "Hey, you've been a little bit different at work this week. Are you okay?" And I think they can truly, I guess, explain the appreciation they have for that type of intervention.
That was Marion County Lieutenant Paul Bloom. Earlier today, we also spoke with Nichole Schmidt. She is Gabby Petito's mother. We talked about Gabby, preventing domestic violence, and the new law named for her daughter. The conversation started with Schmidt describing Gabby, the person.
Gabby was such a fearless, free spirit. She loved to travel. She loved art. She just had no fear, and she wanted to go and see the world. And that's exactly what she did. She set her mind to something and she did it.
I want our audience to understand the magnitude and impact of what happened to your daughter. So as much as you're comfortable, can you take us back to August of 2021?
Well, When we reported her missing on 9/11, we knew something was wrong. We hadn't heard from her, and it was a devastating time. I actually, it was a trauma that I don't remember a lot of it. It was all a blur, but all we wanted to do was find our daughter. And once she was found, that was probably the worst day of our lives. It was the worst couple of weeks of our lives, but that day we'll never forget. But after that, what we needed to do was prevent this from happening to other people. And we just needed to move forward and understand why this happened and how to prevent it from happening to someone else.
Nichole, were there any kind of red flags in the relationship with Brian?
At the time, we did not know of any red flags, uneducated ourselves in the signs of domestic violence. Looking back, we see that her personality was a lot different. And I would say that for me now, seeing that shift in her personality, we knew something was wrong, but we thought she was stressed out. It was most likely a sign of continual strangulation.
Can you explain to me what you mean by that, continual strangulation?
Well, we've been learning a lot as parents, trying to become advocates. So we're actually attending this week a strangulation course, learning about the warning signs of that. And there's no physical signs typically, but there are neurological signs. It's basically when your blood flow is cut off continuously, brain cells are dying. So there are shifts in your personality and the way you behave. And I think that looking back, I can say with certainty that she was strangled numerous times because of the shift in her personality.
Talk to me about what made you decide to form the Gabby Petito Foundation.
The biggest thing for us was Gabby gave us a platform, and we want to save people. We want to prevent this from happening to others, because if you're not in the domestic violence world, which we are now, it's unbelievable how much it happens, and people don't realize it's happening more than you think it does, and it affects us all more than we know, on a societal level. And we all need to work together to make changes. So it was important for us to do something that can help change laws, change the way people view domestic violence, start talking more about it, breaking the silence, and hopefully eventually preventing it from happening for generations to come.
And we now have the Gabby Petito law in Florida. What did you see as a family happening that needed to change in order to create this law?
Well, everybody seen Gabby's police cam video when she was pulled over in Moab. We believe if those officers were trained properly, trauma informed, and had a lethality assessment, that our daughter would be alive today. So we see some states utilize it, some agencies utilize it, but it wasn't mandated. The law did pass in Utah, and it's been successful on some level. There's some obviously some changes that will continue to need to be made. But living in Florida now, we wanted Florida to implement this law so we can see a higher survival rate. We do believe it will save lives.
And Nichole, what is your message to our audience?
Well, I just would like to let people know that if they are in a situation, or they know someone who is, or they suspect someone is, that they are not alone. And there are local agencies you can get in touch with. I know Florida has a hotline. I don't know it off the top of my head. There's a national hotline. You can go online and chat with people, or just talk to a friend or a family member that you trust, because you can't do it alone. And to get out safe, you need somebody to help you through that.
Nichole Schmidt is the mother of Gabby Petito. Gabby was killed by her fiancé in 2021. If you or someone you know is a victim of domestic violence, please know there are ways to get help. Florida's free domestic violence hotline is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You heard Nichole mention it. The number is 1-800-500-1119. If you call it, you'll be connected with crisis intervention information or linked to the closest domestic violence center. Coming up, we will talk to an area facility that aids survivors of domestic abuse. And later, flamenco guitarist Don Soledad stops by the studio to share his Southern Spanish sound. I'm Sharon Stone. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. If you miss any part of the show today, you can always subscribe to the Engage podcast and listen when it's convenient for you. The program will be available on demand at cfpublic.org. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Ahead on this program, the tradition of flamenco music began in the south of Spain. Today, Don Soledad brings that tradition to Central Florida.
For me, it's the connection. It's the connection of within the instrument. Because you're actually feeling the strings, right? I don't know if you can see, like you're touching the strings, and like.
We'll speak with Soledad about Orlando's flamenco scene and bringing his music to Judson's. First, though, Harbor House of Central Florida is Orange County's state-certified domestic violence service provider and one of the largest shelters in the state. The organization works to implement life-saving services. They offer a safe shelter, 24-hour crisis hotline, counseling, legal help, and other assistance for domestic violence survivors, along with their children and pets. Nichole Sperzel is the CEO of Harbor House of Central Florida. She joined Engage to talk about Gabby Petito's law and other ways to support survivors. We started by asking Sperzel about where Florida ranks in the frequency of domestic abuse compared with the rest of the country.
I would say Florida in general, we have a high number of domestic violence cases. And then in the state, Harbor House in Central Florida is ranked second to the number of domestic violence homicides. And so, the first is actually Miami-Dade. And so when we're looking at doing this work and we're looking at the importance of highly lethal relationships, specifically domestic violence relationships, this conversation about domestic violence, the conversation about a lethality assessment is so important so that we're able to, as advocates, talk to survivors about the situation that they are in and be able to tell them scenarios of if your abuser is threatening to kill you or is harming you in front of the children, or if the abuser has perpetrated more than just emotional abuse, that it is physical and it is spiritual and that it's financial, that those are signs that this relationship is not just unhealthy, this relationship is dangerous.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're dealing with reported cases. The number of incidents actually happen must be higher.
Exactly, because not everybody who works with Harbor House or a certified domestic violence center actually reports. And so our numbers are absolutely higher than what's actually being reported. And then there's other things that fall into that. Sometimes a case might be ruled a suicide when indeed it was actually domestic violence, or it might be ruled an overdose when it was actually domestic violence. And so those are other things that happen with where we are in our community.
How do victims in the community find Harbor House? Do they reach out to you, or are they referred to you by law enforcement?
So we have a lot of different ways that people find Harbor House. The first thing is that a lot of people don't know that there's a domestic violence center or there's a service provider until they need one. And so when that happens, then people are looking via social media, they're looking for websites. But a lot of people come to us because a friend tells them about us because they're worried about them. It might be somebody who is a pastor or a rabbi or a person of faith that knows about Harbor House and shares it with someone who's part of their community. We absolutely get referrals from law enforcement and we get referrals from the state attorney's office. And so those are other ways that people find us. United Way, some of our community partners like United Way, iDignity. Those are all different ways that people find us and reach out to us. And the main way that people end up getting connected with Harbor House would be for our crisis hotline. And they'll call to reach an advocate, and just sometimes it's just to even find out what is domestic violence, or I'm in a relationship and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And they're asking questions about what they're experiencing. Other times it's someone who's calling because they need crisis help right away and they need to flee and come into our emergency shelter. Other survivors are calling because they want to file an injunction, and because law enforcement said, I need to file an injunction. I don't know what that is. Can you talk to me about what that is? And when they're talking to an advocate, we can talk about all the other types of services that we're offering, such as peer support, support groups. We'll do safety planning with individuals on the phone.
So as Harbor House takes in people, you provide a safe place, but then you also help the victims find what's next in terms of services?
Yes, and we do that through all of our services. And so one part of our program is absolutely the emergency shelter, where someone, if they need immediate shelter, they can come in with their kids, they can come in with their pets as well, and we can provide that crisis shelter. We also have transitional housing. So someone who's out of the shelter, they're moving into their own housing. But then we also have advocates that are in the community. They're co-located with law enforcement. They're with the Department of Children and Family. They're also within the courthouse. And those advocates can meet anybody who might still be living with the abuser, and they're trying to figure out, how do I leave? Or they might be from another part of the state and they moved to Orange County for a new start, and they really need additional services because the abuser might be harassing them via text, or they might be emailing them nonstop. So those are other situations where we're really there for the survivors, and every case is different. It might be something where someone doesn't know all of their options, and so the advocate is able to go over with them. These are all the different things we can do to help keep you and your kids safe. And it might be that legal help. It might be connecting them with another community resource because there might be immigration issues involved.
Michelle, you mentioned the importance of a lethality assessment, and the Gabby Petito law creates this for officers responding to a domestic violence incident. Can you help us understand what that is?
Absolutely. So in Orange County Sheriff's Office, Apopka PD, and then also Orlando Police Department, they've been doing lethality assessments with survivors for numerous years, and we have advocates that are co-located there. So what ends and that's really important because our community has been very progressive on this. And what's great about the Gabby Petito Act is that it's going to be putting the same type of information in the hands of law enforcement across the state. So we're going to have this huge community response to domestic violence statewide. And what that actually means is that, so if a law enforcement, and typically it's two, are responding to a domestic violence call, one of the law enforcement officers will start talking to both the people involved in order to figure out who is the primary aggressor. And some of the questions that get asked will help figure out who's the primary aggressor. But what's more important as far as being a domestic violence advocate, what's more important to me would be to help them identify which cases are more lethal. And some of the questions that might be asked are, has the abuser ever used a weapon against you? Has the abuser ever threatened to kill you or kill the children or kill your pets? Do you think the abuser is capable of killing you? Has the abuser ever tried to choke you? So those are some really big questions that will be asked. But what's really important about the Gabby Petito Act is that it's not just about the lethality assessment and the questions, it's the training that goes along with it so that those questions are more of a dialogue. So if someone says, has the abuser ever threatened to kill you or your children or your pets? And they say, well, he has hit or kicked our dog before. And then the law enforcement officer can ask follow-up questions to that will help show what is the danger in that home. Or has he ever choked you? And someone might initially say no. And then the officer can ask, well, what does choking mean to you? And then they can ask some more exploratory questions about that. So that's what's really important about not just the assessment, but also the training And the biggest part for us is that they're a crucial tool in assessing and protecting victims of domestic violence. And the training will help law enforcement save more lives because of the fact that they'll be able to help develop safety plans that are tailored to specific risks that might be in that home. It might also help as far as early indication of high risk cases, and that can help prevent further violence. Because if someone is having a dialogue and you're talking to someone about what's happening in your life, then that officer can say, you know, there are domestic violence services here in our local community. I'm going to leave you the pamphlet, but at the same point in time, would you want to call them right now? And that's, we oftentimes get calls from survivors when law enforcement is there and we're able to have a conversation with the survivor. And so that's what's, to me, what's really important about the new Gabby Petito law.
Do you ever speak with patrol officers responding to these situations? I'm wondering what kind of response you get from the officers.
So we, Harbor House and Orange County Sheriff's Office, we recently completed a community mapping project. And what we did is that we mapped some survivors' experience, and then we also, through focus groups, but then we also really mapped what is the process when a survivor calls 911 all the way through to 911, talking to them, law enforcement being dispatched, law enforcement responding with patrol being there, and then also how we follow everything through the criminal justice process. And so when we were doing the community mapping, we had conversations about the domestic violence kit and the domestic violence paperwork. And so I would have to say, although I haven't spoken to patrol officers that are utilizing the kits, what we did find is that if we are able to create a tool that is easy for a law enforcement officer to grab out of their car and take into that situation, and that they are trained on it, that they will be able to better understand who is the primary aggressor and who is the person who really needs domestic violence services. And that is exactly what we saw in the Gabby Petito case. Was the law enforcement officers had a hard time determining who's the primary aggressor. And giving education and training and tools like what's going on with the lethality assessment and the training is going to really help patrol response in that piece alone of who is it that I'm really supposed to focus on as far as providing victim services to, and who is it that we're going to be holding responsible.
And you rely on support from the community to raise money and awareness, and registration is open now for your annual Pause for Peace walk and run, and that benefits animal survivors of domestic violence. Help us understand why that service is so important.
So one of the questions on the lethality assessment is, has the abuser ever harmed the animal? And animals are often the first victims of domestic violence in the home. It's much easier to say that the dog ran away when the abuser beat the dog to death and it's buried in the backyard, or that the cat was run over by the car when the abuser purposely aimed for the animal and ran it over. And they do that to intimidate and threaten, and also to keep the survivor in line, of saying or demonstrating, if you don't listen to me, these are the things that I'm going to do to you. And so one of the biggest barriers of someone coming in is that they might not have kids, or they have their family pet, and that pet is a huge part of the family. And so our Pause for Peace program is, and the kennel that's on site is there for those animal survivors to come in with their person, and they are able to stay on campus, and the survivors are there to be able to take care of their animals. So that's one part of it. The other part for Pause for Peace is that it has a medical care component to it called Marvin's Fund. And that is a life-changing and life-saving program for a lot of our animals that are coming in, because some of our animals have received horrible beatings. They've been stabbed. Their necks have been cut open. And without that fund, we wouldn't be able to help the survivor, because they realize that they need to flee and they don't want to leave their animal behind. And then we're able to help save that animal's lives, which in the long run, that unconditional love that that survivor receives from the animal is so therapeutic, and it's life-changing for that survivor to have them there while they're going through some of the hardest and most difficult days of their life when they're trying to process what's happening to them. To have that unconditional love there is so healing. And also to know that they were able to save themselves and their pets. And that's what our Pause for Peace walk is really about. It's about that. It's about keeping the entire family together. It's about making sure that there are services that are available for the survivors and their pets and their kids. And it's taking away control from that abuser so that the survivor can leave, because we can absolutely house the survivor's pets for them to be able to flee.
What can you say to our audience if they or someone they know is in a domestic violence situation, but they're scared or ashamed or confused?
I would say if someone feels like they are, or if they are worried about a mother, sister, brother, and they want to find out, their friend, they want to find out more, that they really do some research. Jump on Google, look up what domestic violence is, look up what dating violence is, reach out to your local domestic violence center. There's 41 of them across the state of Florida. There are domestic violence centers in every state across the United States. And so the statewide hotline for Florida, that number is 1-800-500-1119. And that on the other end of that line are advocates who can help you. They can help you understand what it is that you're experiencing. They are going to listen to you, and they're going to be non-judgmental. They're going to be offering you advice. They can help safety plan. They can help safety plan for you, your kids, your sister. They can help you come up with a safety plan to get out of a situation that you're in. And also, I think the most important thing is to know that violence against you is not your fault. Someone who loves you should never hurt you. Someone who loves you will never take your right away. They'll never take your consent away. And that you should not be ashamed that someone who you thought loved you hurt you. That shame belongs to them and not you.
Nichole Sperzel is the CEO of Harbor House of Central Florida. Harbor House operates the only on-site kennel in the region for pets of domestic abuse survivors at its emergency campus, so no family member is left in an abusive home. And you heard Sperzel mention their annual Pause for Peace walk and run for awareness and ending abuse. That is happening on April 27th. It's at Blue Jacket Park, that's in Baldwin Park in Orlando. And money raised helps survivors and their pets staying at Harbor House. You're encouraged to bring your dog to participate in the events. And again, registration is open now. Coming up, flamenco artist Don Soledad joins us in our studio. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. And don't forget, we want to hear from you. Let us know what you'd like to hear more about or what you're glad you heard. You can send us an email to engage@cfpublic.org. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Don Soledad was born and raised in a musical family from Northern California. At a young age, he showed a proclivity for guitar and a passion for flamenco music. He studied for years with masters of Spanish guitar. 9 years ago, his journey brought him to Orlando. Flamenco is a music of passion, usually accompanied by equally emotionally intense dance. Soledad brings this passion to the stage with his band, the Don Soledad Trio. The trio will be playing Judson's Live at the Dr. Phillips Center on the 16th. Soledad joined us in our studio to talk about the music, the dance, and his guitar. The conversation started with a brief history of flamenco.
Flamenco is the music of the gypsies, the gitanos, the gypsies in Spain. So they brought that to southern Spain, and basically that's where it started. And it's a very rhythmic music, but it's a different time signature. It goes in 12s. So if you look at a clock, if you're looking at a clock, so 12, 1, 2, 3, if you count the numbers of the clock, there's accents within those numbers. So 12, 3, 6, 8, 10, 12. So if you're clapping 12, 3, 6, 8, 10, 12, 3. So you're playing guitar. 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it's that kind of thing.
Nice.
So the significance, I think, as far as your question, contemporary music, there's not really a connection in the beginning, but the guy that got me into flamenco, Paco de Lucia, he started collaborating with musicians like jazz musicians, jazz guitarists. So they did, they did the Super Trio tour, and they kind of made albums. So it kind of became like more of a fusion flamenco, world music kind of guitar thing. And that's kind of like what started it all for a lot of musicians. Paco de Lucia started, he was the pioneer in that.
When did you realize that this wasn't just a hobby, that this could be a career?
Honestly, I think if you have a little bit of talent, and you put in a lot of hard work and you love it, you're passionate about the music, and almost, you're almost like just crazy about something, right? You just keep going and you just fall in love with it. And that's how I feel about flamenco. The fact that I can, well, for me, I'm just speaking about myself, I can compose music and make albums. And, the creative process for me is just amazing, That's what kind of keeps me going. And collaborating with people, performing with my band, being in that zone when you're performing on stage, those things. So those things started becoming more of a reality for me as I kept moving forward, So I just kept on going.
Is there a flamenco scene in parts of Central Florida?
There used to be a place in downtown Orlando, Ceviche, which is a restaurant, but they closed down. There used to be a lot of flamenco there, but when I first moved here, there wasn't much, and even now, probably a handful of guitarists that I know that perform like flamenco, because there's two types of flamenco. People think flamenco and like rumba flamenca, Gypsy Kings, So it's just 4/4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. That's the typical what people think is flamenco, right?
Okay.
But it's really just a palo, which is a form of flamenco, because flamenco has so many forms. The traditional flamenco is the one I told you about, which is in 12s, That kind of stuff with a dancer and the singer and stuff like that, That's more traditional. I do perform with dancers, amazing dancers from Venezuela, and they run an academy here in Dr. Phillips' area. So I work with them.
Does the music tell a story with the dancer? Are you leaning on each other? How does that work?
So the compás, which is what I talked about, the clock thing with the accents. Everybody, as a flamenco musician, you have to know those accents, and within that form or those accents, there's sort of a language, right? There's sort of a theme for like por bulerías, like, which is more lively kind of thing. So there's these palos, which are forms, and each flamenco musician or artist would know that, and they would follow that. But with dancers, you have to follow the dancer. Choreography wise, she's kind of like in control.
Okay.
So when you're kind of putting this together for like rehearsal or whatever, you're putting the choreography together in the music. She will make some kind of like movement, and you follow that movement, and you stop. But it's all within the structure of the 12-beat compás,
Okay.
Yeah, so it keeps going. It just keeps going, and you're following that, and the dancer is following it, the footwork, all that stuff. So it's amazing, It's like so much going on, but it's controlled, kind of controlled chaos kind of thing, It's amazing to be part of, for sure.
It's controlled, but it seems like there also is some kind of element of improv in it.
Yeah, there's rules to it, but the thing with flamenco is there's rules that you're supposed to follow as far as the rhythm, but you're open to create your own improvisation to a point, because you can't suddenly get off the compás, which is the rhythm structure, right? But within that compás, you can create. Like for guitarists, this is the typical thing of like bulerías. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. And then this is a falsetta. Falsetta is just a little solo that you can put in between. And then you go back into the rhythm. So there's like a rhythm of the form, and then you do a little solo for yourself, like whatever you want to do, as long as it's in that structure, and then you go back into that to the compás, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a maze of these different things you can do, but it's kind of constructed to where you have to be in that structure.
What's the difference between playing just with your fingers versus a pick?
For me personally, I used to play with a pick, you know, like growing up. I played like heavy metal, rock, and all that stuff on the guitar, you know, just for fun. Because my brother was the guitarist. He's like, give me that guitar, you know, you play the drums. So for me, it's the connection, you know, it's the connection of within the instrument, you know, because you're actually feeling the strings, right? I don't know if you can see, like, you're touching the strings and you know, like. So it has, for me, and plus you can't do some things with a pick that you can do with the fingers. You know,
Okay.
you have individual, you know, control with the fingers. You have, you know, you use 4 fingers instead of 1 pick. You know, so you can do all these horas guiadas. A lot more expression, I think. You know, a lot more arsenal. You know, for the more technique you have, the more you can, you know, really express yourself.
How does the audience react when you're performing?
I hope good. I hope they enjoy it. So far, so good, right? I think a lot of people look at, because flamenco guitar is so different from other styles, and we don't use a pick, we use our fingers, kind of like classical guitar in bossa nova. So, you know, and it's fast. You know, you're doing all these rasgueados and all these techniques. So they just watch your fingers, you know, and then they get captured by the sound of flamenco guitar.
Yeah, I was
the
wondering,
energy.
Are they watching you play your hands, or are they resisting the urge to dance, or do they not resist?
I think a lot of people want to dance, but then they start hearing the beat, the compás. They're like, how do I bob my head to this thing? You know, because some of it's difficult, right? Unless you just do the 4/4. Then you can kind of dance. You can dance salsa to this thing. You know, like the 4/4 thing. But yeah, I think a lot of them try to do the palmas, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But if the audience does it too much, it'll mess me up. So I can't listen to them. So it's, you know, they have to kind of know what they're doing, you know, because the dancers do that as well. So, you know, all the elements.
Let's talk about Judson's. Not your first time there, but it seems to be just a really beautiful, intimate setting. Can you just talk to me about playing that venue?
Yeah, it's amazing. I've been there twice now. One time performing and one time watching the Michel Camilo trio. I think it's really what Orlando needed. You know, I mean, we have like Blue Bamboo Center for the Arts, which is a staple in Winter Park, and Timucua Arts Foundation in downtown Orlando. So we have only a few of these event centers that you know, really promote live music and support, you know, local musicians that create their own music. So that's an important thing for me, because that's what I do. But with Judson's is, I mean, it's an amazing venue. Once you walk in there, you're like, am I in New York, you know?
Is there anything that you wish people understood more about your work or flamenco?
I think for me, since I compose my own music, for them to kind of see where, you know, the flamenco inspiration comes from, and also my inspiration that has nothing to do with flamenco. You know, like my bossa nova influence, my Latin influence, things like that. And because I put it together as I compose. So I'm in this balancing act, per se. And some people, when they listen to my music, they go, oh man, that sounds flamenco, but it's beyond flamenco, what I'm doing. Because I have violin, I have piano, I have strings, I have everything within my music. So I try to have all that to support what I'm doing, and hopefully it comes out great.
I really appreciate you just playing throughout, and it helps me, as someone who doesn't know how to play an instrument, understand just the importance of the counts and the beating. And I'm wondering if there's something else that you could just play for us and tell us why you picked it.
Sure. This one, I'll play. What should I play? I'll play. This is from my first album. This one is called Camino de Seda, which means the Silk Road. So this is a rumba, which is 4/4. You know. So.
exactly what you said was going to happen. I was bopping along and I was watching
There you
your
go.
fingers.
There you go. Yeah, it helps people move, for sure.
The Don Soledad Trio will play Judson's Live at the Dr. Phillips Center on Tuesday, April 16th. And you can also catch him tonight at the Winter Park Library. That's part of the Blue Bamboo Center for the Arts concert series. That is all for today's edition of Engage on Central Florida Public Media. We'll be back on Tuesday afternoon at 3 o'clock. You can learn more about today's program by visiting our website, cfpublic.org. And that is where this show will be available on demand. We want to hear from you. Let us know what you'd like to hear more about, what you're glad you heard. Send us an email to engage@cfpublic.org, or you can send us a talkback on the free Central Florida Public Media app. I'm Sharon Stone. Thank you for the company. All Things Considered is coming up following NPR News.